A brand community is not similar to brand awareness. Instead, it is a place where people who have an emotional connection with the brand can connect with each other and with the brand. In our next panel discussion, the panel of experts will discuss the topic iconic brands as builders of culture and community. It's my pleasure to invite Ambi Paramaveshwaran, founder brandbuilding.com, to moderate this discussion.
Hi, welcome to ET Brand World Summit 2021. I'm very excited here to be moderating a talk, a conversation really, on iconic brands as builders of culture and community. A mouthful topic, but as you will slowly discover, our panelists will make it more palatable, digestible, enjoyable for you. We have with us a fabulous panel of CMOs of some really brands and companies we truly admire. Santosh Iyer, VP Sales and Marketing, Mercedes-Benz. Deepa Krishnan, Director Marketing and Category Loyalty for Tata Starbucks, another brand all of us love. Vivek Sharma, CMO Pidilite. Kavita Rao, Country Commercial Manager, IKEA India. And of course, not to forget, Shubhranshu Singh, Global Head of Marketing for Royal Enfield. So thank you very much for joining me on this panel. And the topic is a little heavy, iconic brands, builders of culture and community. So how do brands become part of culture? Does the fact infusing brands with a purpose, does it do the trick, or is there something more to it? So for the viewers, I think there is also a fabulous book called, I think, Culture Branding, written by Douglas Holt, who was formerly with Harvard and with Oxford. And he's done great work on cultural branding. So those of you who want to dig deeper into cultural branding, I would strongly refer one of Douglas Holt's books. But if you don't have the time to read such heavy books, just stay with us for an hour and we'll give you a lot of gyan from people who are really building iconic brands, infusing them with purpose, and making them part of our cultural landscape. So let me start by asking a very basic question. What is the role of branding and how do brands become part of culture? And does infusing them with a purpose do the trick? So let me go first with Santosh. Do you want to take it on first?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting topic and also a topic which you can elaborate and discuss for quite some time. But trying to make it short and putting the point across, I would borrow maybe a quote from Mark Twain, which says that there are only two important days in your life: the day that you were born and the day when you found your own purpose. I think that also applies to brands, to a large aspect. And when I can talk about Mercedes Benz, this brand, we invented the car, we continue to invent it. And when you look at from our experience, we went back to the founding principles of the inventors of the car itself to find what did they mean. And we took a very massive exercise couple of years back, again just to go back into our DNA, and we said yes, our purpose is to move the world. So that can come from mobility perspective, but then it's also important to add the first to it. So because we were the first to invent the car, we have to be the first to reinvent it again, be it in terms of sustainability or be it in terms of digitalization or any other topics on the mobility side. And it's not only limited to cars, but anything to do with mobility. So I think that's the driving mantra for us to also look and position our brand in the consumer's mind. The second biggest challenge is to how to make it relevant, because it's also that one is as a brand or as an organization, you can have the purpose to drive this, but can we make it relevant? Also, can we make it relevant to culture? So, for example, in India now, we have been there for 25 years. We have had our own shares of highs and lows, and highs now again. And so we also learn from this. We also learn what does this brand stand for in India, So if you go to the southern part of India, they even don't call it Mercedes, they call it Benz. Whereas up north it's only Merc, as such as being said. So how can you relate to this? What can we do to be part of this ecosystem? Is also quite critical to become iconic in that sense. So I think it's a combination of factors, and personally, I believe purpose definitely plays a major role in trying to define and actually make the brand iconic itself.
Great, thank you very much, Santosh. Now let's go from Mercedes-Benz to Starbucks. So Deepa, your take on this thing about building iconic brands through infusing purpose and culture and all that stuff.
Sure. So, you spoke about three things. You spoke about brands, you spoke about culture and purpose. Talking about brands, I'm going to borrow a quote from Maya Angelou, who said that people may forget what you say to them or do for them, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And I truly believe that iconic brands have a way of making customers feel special. It's as simple as that. But you have to do it in every transaction, every day, in every way that you can touch them. And it's really about that connection that you can have with customers. In terms of culture, honestly, I feel, and I'm actually reminded about an interesting principle called the 99% principle, which says that 99% of the time, the customer is not thinking about your brand. And many marketers make the mistake of assuming the opposite. So we have to identify what's important for customers in the 99% of their lives, and how do we become relevant for customers, really meaningful for them. And I think only those brands who are able to understand what makes the customers tick, what excites them, are the ones who become iconic and can really infuse themselves with the culture, of the place. The third thing is really purpose, and I honestly feel this has to be something which your founders need to believe in, which your brand mission should really be all about. For example, the Starbucks brand mission is to inspire and nurture the human spirit, one person, one cup, one neighborhood at a time. So we often say we're not in the coffee business, we're really in the people business. And when we get up every morning, we are asking ourselves a question of how can we make that interaction with customers special? How can we inspire their spirit? How can we contribute to the communities that we serve? What can we do for the environment, world that we live in? And I think it's only if it's so deeply ingrained into aspect of your business does it become meaningful. And customers are smart, employees are even smarter. People can see through something that you want to do, just as a fad versus something that you deeply believe in and are committed to every day.
Thank you. I think you touched upon a few interesting things like fads, which I think we will come to, because I have some strong views on what is called moment marketing and this whole business riding on the most popular purpose of the day. Right, today it is the girl child, tomorrow it is Paralympics, and the third day it is something else. So we'll discuss that. Let me now go to Vivek to have his take on this building iconic brands, infusing purpose, and becoming a cultural icon.
Yeah, so thank you. Iconic brands. First, we have to define what are iconic brands. All brands advertise, all brands are relevant to their consumers and customers. I believe iconic brands are the brands which become part of culture, which actually then begin to transcend what they stand for in terms of the product categories or the emotional platforms. And iconic brands are built over the years. So I have three simple principles to share with everyone as to what can perhaps make brands iconic. First of all, for brands to become iconic, the first thing is they have to carefully define their core proposition and values. And they have to stay true to it, unfocused throughout years. Iconic brands are built over decades. And brands have a tendency to go with, as you say, fad, marketing teams come and go, and they have the first propensity is to change the brand proposition or advertising. So brand has to stay core, true to the proposition and value. To give an example, Fevicol proposition has been unbreakable bonds in 1970s, and it has stayed true to that, over decades. So that is one thing, and it's simpler to say, but very difficult to do. Second thing, I believe brands become iconic when they begin to talk to the right side of the brain of the consumer or stakeholder, which means they must transcend beyond the functional benefits, and we must begin to talk about the emotional benefits of the brand, and not only about the product, but about what brands stand for. So talking to emotions is very important. And here, what makes a brand iconic is when they begin to deep dive into the insights, the cultural insights, and when they begin to actually operate from the emotional values coming out of the Indian culture or the culture in which they operate, that is when they begin to truly relate to the heart of the consumer and stakeholder. And that is when they begin to become part of the culture, define the culture, and become language of a country. So, for example, number of times we have heard film star, politician refer to Fevicol in their conversations, because Fevicol doesn't stand for an adhesive now. It stands for bonding, not bonding between physical object, but bonding between human beings, bonding between nations. So that is second thing. And last but not the least, brands don't just become iconic when they talk to only the consumers who buy and consume the brand. Brands become iconic when they talk to all the stakeholders in the value chain. They must talk to the consumers, of course. They must talk to consumers who are consuming today, but also the consumers who will consume tomorrow. So Fevicol not only talks to people who make furniture, but we talk to 18 to 25, even though they're not making furniture or buying furniture, or even younger audience in school. We talk to carpenters, we talk to contractors, we talk to our dealers, we talk to wholesalers. We not only talk, it's not just about communication, Ambi, it's also about actions through which we relate to them. So for example, Fevicol has a very strong loyalty program called Fevicol Champions Club. Now, that is not just about marketing product, it's about relating to contractors socially, culturally, celebrating their children's education achievements, participating in their festivals, and upgrading them professionally. So when you talk to stakeholders beyond just marketing your proposition, that is when you become iconic. I think you touched upon a very relevant topic of purpose. Now, purpose can be a fad when you relate to it seasonally. When I call it seasonally, which means you make a film about maybe a specialized section of the society or somebody disadvantaged or poverty, and that content does become viral. But a brand purpose makes a brand iconic when the purpose is infused into the brand proposition. You see, it has to live through not only communication and videos, but it has to live through your action with the stakeholders. So purpose has to be long lasting, live through actions with all stakeholders, and that is what is make it iconic. And purpose can't be just about what I call fad in the social medium. A purpose have to be lived through, and that is when it lasts for decades. So that's what I have to share. And fundamentally, brands don't just become iconic by peddling their propositions all the time. They have to become part of conversations of your stakeholders and consumer every day, or topical conversations. So Fevicol will not only comment upon bonding, but will also talk upon the flooding which happens in monsoons in Bombay, as much as Ganpati, as much as about Diwali, or as much about Ronaldo taking off those cans off the table. So these are some of the ways in which I think brands can become iconic and infuse purpose into their what I call DNA in a far deep-rooted fashion.
Great. So thank you, Vivek. So if Fevicol has its say, furniture can't be far behind. So now let me go to IKEA and ask Kavita. Of course, IKEA is young in India, but IKEA globally is an iconic brand. So your take on this whole business of becoming iconic, becoming a cultural icon, as well as infusing purpose into the brand. Yeah, Kavita, your views, please.
Yeah, sure, Ambi. Thanks for that question. And I think it is the glue that holds the furniture together. Maybe that is the transition from Vivek to myself. But I think very interesting viewpoints from the panelists. Maybe I can add with my 2 cents. As people were talking, I was thinking about 2 important emotions that we normally associate with an iconic brand. One is the aspect of power that the brand brings forward. And the second is the popularity, or the fact that it touches
people's lives and many people's lives in a certain fashion. So that is what I was reflecting on as the other panelists were talking about the topic. And then in the context of IKEA, I can think of three aspects. One is, of course, the aspect of being purpose-led. And for us, it always starts with the vision of creating a better everyday life for the many people. And then we are a home furnishing retailer, and the home is always very emotional. But what is interesting is the fact that the whole objective of the organization sits on the fact that it is about affordable home furnishing, and it is not about people with just thicker wallets who can afford home furnishing, but how could people with thinner wallets actually have something for their home, and how can home furnishing actually create or make a small but meaningful difference to people's lives. So if you look at the products from within IKEA, I think most of the iconic products that are there, be it a Billy bookcase or a ma'am bed, always have a lot of stories associated with it. And then most of our products, when it starts with the aspect of design, starts with, of course, functionality, which is very important, but also the value proposition. But more importantly, how can each product contribute to sustainability in some fashion? Is it because it is making use of less raw materials? Is it because the raw materials are maybe obtained from recycling, which is better for the environment? And then the second aspect is also related to the cultural context and what kind of a role does the brand play in the context of cultural activism, if I can call that, and how is that impacting the transformation or the culture? So one of the very interesting examples is some of the work that we've done with social entrepreneurs across the world, including India, where the idea then is how do we give artisans who normally might not have access to markets across the world an opportunity to place their products because they have the skill set in a global environment, right? And what does that mean? And how do consumers perceive a brand in this context? The fact that it is not just about using the product, but also a meaningful contribution towards the society in that sense. And maybe I think the other aspect of an iconic brand is how do we really keep refreshing the brand and keep it relevant as things change in society. And there again, I see, for example, when in India, we speak a lot about gender equality. And one of the main reasons why we do that is because we can see that in most organizations, maybe people are talking about 30% women in the workforce, but in the society, it is a 50-50. And then maybe it can actually lead to a transformation in terms of how we look at the cultural context and what is something that is very relevant and a topic that is being discussed in society. So these are three examples I was thinking of, and maybe both in terms of the product range, in terms of the communication, in terms of the larger society and community that you operate in, what kind of messages and communication do you stand for? But more importantly, is that really part of the DNA of the organization? Is that how you do business? Maybe that is where the real difference comes in terms of being purpose-led, and that in turn contributing to a brand being seen as iconic. So that is my, few cents on it.
Great. So we've had interesting perspective, and I think we should get, Royal Enfield is really a brand which is actually risen from the dead to, I remember as a kid, I used to have a ESD motorcycle and I used to envy guys with a Bullet. And I don't know whether Subhranshu is aware that the Bullet Meri Jaan film was made by Prahlad Kakkar, and he was my neighbor for some years. And he used to ride a Bullet. And there's an interesting little, I'm sorry, I'm plugging your brand. I'm apologizing to all the others. So there is an interesting little thing in that film which he made many years ago, I think 1979, 80, where this guy pats the Bullet's tank with his hand. That's actually pull off from a horse rider patting the horse on the back. So, what do you call subliminal cueing or whatever. So Subhranshu, now take it away. Tell us about iconic branding, culture, purpose, the whole mix.
Sure. Thanks, Ambi. I'll come to Royal Enfield in a moment, but I'm relieved that I am in a sense being asked last, because then now I have a chance to strike a slightly contrarian note. Not just for effect, but I truly believe that I think in the right earnest, I think most of us, and I am no exception, most marketers overstate the role that brands play in building culture. I mean, I think often by itself, it would be an innocent overclaim to say a brand is building culture. I think what a brand can do is to very powerfully extend an ideology, create a platform, bring folks on board, be representative of a mood, even sort of provide for some sort of myth building, or even own a slice of life, like Royal Enfield is doing, for instance, which is about exploration, about riding, about being with a community of like-minded riders. So the motorcycle is actually the means to get into that community, which is an inclusive community. And we are not a motorcycle brand, we are a motorcycling brand. But I think when we say that, we have to be conscious that everything we do has to look right with the purpose that has been declared, and we consciously have to create culture, then I think, we are ill-equipped as a community, I'm saying, of marketers, because everybody who's been to business school doesn't really live in the real world, because, they're living as stewards of cultural essence. They are clinging on to a brand manual. They're not really improvising in the manner of jazz, and that's what's required for culture building. So my question is, for a brand to be active in contributing to culture is good enough. For a brand to stand for something in people's mind, that's good enough. So if we stick to our knitting, but be mindful of, what is our legitimacy, what is our space that has been granted to us, what are the associations that we can build, then I think over a period in time, it in a sense bleeds into culture, rather than being so conscious about that architecture to begin with. Oh, anything less than culture building is a failure. I think that would be shortchanging our own profession and our own function. I was seeing an interview of Salim Khan a few months ago, where he said now there are PhDs which are being done on this persona of the angry young man and Amitabh Bachchan, and how he was aggressive and deep masculinity, and on a whim taking on the world. But he says at that time, we used to write, and then in the evening we used to go to have some chow mein in Bandra. We didn't think we were creating culture. We were just living in the real world. That mood of being angry and the need for an angry young man was percolating in, and there was an overdose of Rajesh Khanna in that era, and so we created this, and it became a hit. So I think if you're doing what's right for the moment, and if you're doing it beyond content, there are many authors. I think it's certainly the culture industries play a very relevant and a very significant role. But I think if you just if you are mindful of what your brand stands for and do more around that in small concentric circles, I think you have some hope to to building culture. And lastly, like the MBA curriculum is to be accused, advertising as the groovier part of marketing is also to be equally accused, because we are over reliant on building culture through a 30 or a 60-second television spot. So I think in the internet era, consumption of brand content and culture building are becoming one in the same, and it's peer to peer. So I think lots more is happening which we don't, at least I don't fully fathom. And I think therefore culture building is a consequence, it should not be the intention. With that, I'll rest my case.
I think that was good, good contrarian point of view. So let me now jump to talk about how, when you're building an iconic brand and you're building cultural relevance into your brand, you're baking it into your brand, putting purpose into it, mixing all this up. And I want to talk about, I want you guys to talk about how do brands engage with customers, and what should they do or not do? So let me go to Subhranshu for his view on that.
So if I understood right, you're saying how do the customers engage with the brand in terms of...
Yeah, exactly. So how do you engage with customers, and how do you encourage customers? I think Deepa Kavita did make a comment, right? Consumer is not, is going to blog and tweet about his detergent powder or his toothpaste. But they will blog and tweet and post photographs with their Mobike or with their Mercedes Benz or or maybe even their new Billy bookcase. I love the Billy bookcase. I may post a photo of that if if I have a great experience in the Thana showroom of IKEA. But
Yeah.
what do you guys do? What can all marketers learn from companies like Royal Enfield? And I'll go to Benz again to say, look, how do you encourage customers? How do you engage with customers? How do you encourage brand conversations?
So, I think the toolkit has been kept fairly simple. I mean, in Royal Enfield, Siddharth has been very mindful that all across the various stages of our evolution, it's always been about riding with people, riding at every tier. So we call it ride pure, and ride more. So at some point in time, it starts to hopefully become the center of what your being is outside of what you do for a living. And I think in doing that, you cultivate friendships, you explore the world, and so on and so forth. So I think the distillate of it is, if it's simple, people get in and start engaging, and then over a period in time, the social view gets firmed up. And I think it's very important, again, to my earlier point, I think business schools are just overemphasizing.
तो business school क्यों मार रहे हो यार?
No, because that's the feedstock, Ambi. I mean, that's exactly the reason why the templates survive, is because, you're taught brand as economic entity, brand as, and then some pop psychology. I challenge you to tell me where in the earlier stages of even brand training are you taught a social perspective. Now, when you're going to be with a brand or championing a brand that has a social responsibility at a large scale, where community, there are 5 million motorcyclists from Royal Enfield, but 8 million social media followers are heavily engaged. That's a community. So if you don't have a social view of it, you will end up dealing in a very Lilliput manner with individuals. And that's the reason why you have to talk about the community as a single entity. And to engage them, we of course do things which are in a sense smaller and piecemeal, which largely is getting people to get their bums on the saddle and go out riding. So the riding is the primary activity, but it's also about being authentic. You're not talking to them adsy. You're not showing them things which are sort of airbrushed. You're showing them real riding. 60 to 70% of our social media content and our website content is user-generated content. So that sort of then starts to build a virtuous loop. What I see is what is really out there, and then I believe the brand and I lean in a little more. And lastly, about this purpose bit, and I'll just build this in the community answer, is one of the benefits of being Royal Enfield is because there are millions of people who are riding along with us, you can do cause-related effects at destination, or even something as simple as riders going all the way up to Ladakh, encouraging them not to use plastic, single-use plastic. These are things which are easy to-dos, but cumulatively have a big impact. So it's I think the important part is that you're symbolic of something which is about exploration, camaraderie, the life of a rider. The community then begins to lend weight to it, and then that positive momentum builds on, and from that come stories and narratives and metaphors and so on. If you get up one fine day and say, I want to build a community which should be injected with purpose, it's almost impossible. And I think Vivek spoke about that. So it's not a tool, it is a consequence.
And you build it slowly. And I think in B schools, we try and teach students that, but maybe we can do a better job. I agree. So let me go to Deepa, who's smiling. So she will tell us how they encourage their, I suppose Starbucks India has several million followers as well. So how do you encourage this? Do you tell people to have a birthday party in Starbucks, or engagement, or propose to their girlfriend in Starbucks? And what do you do?
Okay, so interestingly, we are a millennial brand. Most of our customers actually are millennials, and maybe people in their late 30s, early 40s. And all of our customers are extremely active on social media. So it's not something, honestly, in today's world, it is a two-way communication. Gone are the days of when, you sent out communication in the world and, that was it. It is really about two-way communication. And every opportunity customers today are engaging very actively with the brand. They have a very strong point of view on everything that you do. I think the trick is to make sure that you have, meaningful conversations. I'll give you an example. In our case, this beautiful offline ritual of, calling out a customer's name, which you spoke about as well. When COVID hit us, one of the biggest challenges that we had is that we are known as the third place where there are connections that are built inside the store. How do we keep that engagement alive? How do we keep the connection alive in this world where, some stores are closed or, it's only on delivery, etc. One of the things that we did at that point in time is we came up with the Starbucks Barista Call Out campaign, where we actually sent personalized voice notes to our social media followers who, commented on their favorite beverage. So, for example, it would be a tall Americano for Ambi. You would get that in your, in your Insta feed. So it was a beautiful way of taking an offline ritual online and really connecting with customers one-on-one. So I think in today's world, the customer already has a point of view. He or she is already actively engaging with every brand because of social media. It's about how do you make sure those conversations continue to stay relevant and rich. And it all goes back to how well do you understand your customer? How well do you understand what excites them? What are frustration points for them, pain points for them? And therefore, in your own authentic way, how can you have a conversation with them that's meaningful?
So if I tweet a complaint with the Starbucks tag Starbucks India, how many minutes will it take before I get a reply?
So we have a turnaround time which should be less than 2 hours for any positive or negative complaint. Thankfully, we get far more positive responses, but either way, you will get a response.
So at one time, the joke was you had a problem with I'm talking about a brand which is not represented here. I have a problem with Club Mahindra. All you have to do is to tag Anand Mahindra onto your complaint, and you will get a call back from them within a few minutes. I don't know whether this is true, but this was doing the rounds in social media. Now, let me go to Santosh and say, look, you're a luxury brand and you're a CEO's brand. Does social media, engaging customers, does it devalue a brand, or do you still do those kind of things? It'll be a very interesting, very different perspective from, say, a Royal Enfield or a Starbucks or a Fevicol. In fact, we've got a great diversity of brands here, which is amazing. So I should thank the ET team for putting this masala mix here together. So Santosh, tell us, what do you do about engaging with your customers? Will you send me a bouquet? When for my birthday, do you send me bouquet or what?
So let me explain. I think some of the fundamentals don't change irrespective of the masala brands that we operate. Many of us in this panel are iconic brands built over a period of time with a lot of work behind it. I think Vivek mentioned this point that for any brand to be iconic, it's not the core consumption group, it's also the adjacent group that needs to look up the brand, and that's also important. So before I come to what do we do for our customers and others, let me also say that we run a business around 5 to 6 million euros a year, which is to do with merchandising. We are now today selling right from pens to small stuff on our own online store. We have cycles, fitness cycles, one of the most sold item on our fitness store. It again costs a lakh of rupees, but still we have people who tend to buy it for gifting, or they try to buy it for themselves, because the 3-pointed star is highly aspirational. So basically, even if I'm not able to afford a car today, but can I gift it or can I own it in some piece of it? And including categories like perfumes, we do exceedingly well with consumers buying them. So that's something to keep the flame alive, among a very large amount of target group who today are not core consumption group, but yes, they are kids or spouses or parents and stuff who are all engaged with the brand. So that's something we do, which very few know, but yes, it's there on the online space, and we do a tremendous amount of business. The other part for our core customers. Now here we again differentiate, because we have one set of customers who are enthusiasts. They are performance car drivers. They love to drive cars, and yes, we have something called emotion tours. And again, here it's not on the racetrack, but also go to Chikmagalur or go to that road, which is some Atal Tunnel, some stuff. It's again a bit of community building, and because AMG is a much more smaller community, in terms of number of people who own these cars. On the larger basis, we also look at what are their passion points. So for example, golf is one community sport. Many of our customers are actively engaged, and for the last 20 years we run the Mercedes Trophy. Now that's again one of the most coveted golfing amateur tournaments. So we have customers, and then we have prospects wanting a slot, and there again we tell that only if you come via customer you can still get, we can try to accommodate if we have slots. So we try to create that community with the golfing, with golfers, etc. The third is hygiene, and this is something I keep telling our retailers, because we don't meet customers as much directly as much as our dealers and the partners do. And here my favorite quote is, execution is the only strategy customer sees. So we can talk about the brand, we can talk about the promise, but if that sales consultant doesn't deliver the car on time, or if the service advisor in the workshop is not given a clean car, because it's not even a repaired car but even a clean car to the customer, the entire brand promise may fall. So for us, we put a lot of effort on recruiting people, training them, doing process standards to ensure that we are able to live up to that promise. So ideally, and again, I don't want to commit 100% here, ideally you visit a Mercedes-Benz store and you have the coffee there, you will find the three-pointed star on the coffee. Again, we have specified which kind of coffee should be served in Mercedes-Benz outlets. So that's something that we strive for, trying to build that connect. Also, then there are occasional stuff, because car is again a purchase which is bought for special occasions, for birthdays, anniversaries. So we have many instances where we deliver the car midnight, right outside the house. We create events for customer deliveries. So these are something that we do, which also helps us connect the customer more. But I would also like to go maybe a couple of steps back, because and just to clarify our point of view when it comes to the purpose-led branding, I could sense that the panel was also getting a bit drawn into the discussion that purpose is also led to a social cause. And for me, or for us, the purpose is a guiding north star, and it's not a marketing topic. It goes beyond. It's a management level topic to be decided from the organization. What's your north star that you want to achieve? Where do you want to go? I think Deepa gave a very good example of the janitor in the US, and something similar where the entire organization is aligned. Now, whether you want to align communication to it, how can you make it contextual? And again, an example I can give is, I mentioned about first move the world. 2 years back we launched the electric car in India, and the big question was, where is India ready for electric? But we said, if we don't do it, who else will? And therefore we continued it. And then when we saw many of the manufacturers now launching electric vehicles, we have opened up our entire charging network free of cost to the entire ecosystem. And we said, yes, customers of competitor brands can come and charge at our charging stations, which is around 100 in India. And this is led by a purpose. This is not led for marketing. We have not created a full page ad saying our charging stations are open. Of course, we have communicated it via press and comm and communications. But I think we believe that if we don't give that charging, because one of the biggest pain point for developing an electric vehicle ecosystem is charging. So if we don't participate there, and if we don't take that lead in doing it, we will not be true to what we feel as an organization. And I think the entire consumers, even our competitors, they all acknowledged it. They said, hey, great, that's something that we never expected. You invested in 100 charging points and then you're opening up for everybody else. So this is just an example of how you can go and be as factual to what you want to do, just as an example.
Oh, great. I just step in about talk about, electric vehicles. I know, my son's friend who lives in the US, he was driving from East Coast to West Coast 4 years ago, I think, on his Tesla. And so, and Tesla told him where to stop for charging the vehicle. And they also told him post photographs of wherever you go, and we will share it on social media. So they actually tracked that guy's drive. I'm not talking of today. This happened 4 years ago. Yeah. He drove from East Coast to West Coast, and Tesla said, we will track you every step of the way. So obviously they want to build a culture of of electric cars, breaking the myth that it is very difficult to charge an electric vehicle on the road, etc., etc. So I mean, great. So let me come to the last question, and I'm open to kind of any one of you can answer this and jump in. Feel free. How is a digitally powered customer affecting our brand building job? There is a digitally powered customer, and as all you know, 1999, this lady Naomi Klein wrote that book, No Logo, right? I mean, today that consumer knows what is going on, right? So there's a digitally powered customer who can call out, who can easily call out, name and shame you. And of course, at one time I used to believe Indians are very polite, and I never used to think that in Twitter they will not attack you. And now it's all gone. Anything can be attacked. Any brand can be attacked. Any brand can be attacked for something which they did not do, right? I mean, recently there was a story about a brand which got attacked, and the brand said, look, this happened 4 years ago. It was not us. It was one of our fans or someone who did it, who used our logo. But no, boycott. So how do you navigate this toxic ecosystem? Subhranshu, you're nodding very wisely. You go first, yeah.
No, I'm nodding in acknowledgement, Ambi, because our business is a business which is purely tactile. You have to be on the road. People don't commit to a purchase before they've had a test ride. They come to dealer stores. It was largely brick and mortar. And then last year, when the COVID pandemic hit us, I mean, the first thing that stopped was anybody out there on the roads on wheels. And so, but life didn't stop. In fact, there was a tidal surge. There was, almost a quadrupling of interest and inquiries, simply because people were living their riding experience vicariously. But more importantly, it showed how deep in India and across the world, but particularly in India, the internet-based lifestyle has percolated. So people are now doing way more of their due diligence online, which includes interactions with influencers, peer-to-peer reviews, even something as simple as the ratings for our individual dealers matter way more today than they did ever in the past, and also their social media activity in their respective catchments. So I think the first thing that has changed is people are deciding to do things after a lot of time spent doing desk research and on their phones and on their desktops. Secondly, people are comparing and consuming third-party commentary a lot more. And lastly, when they are experiencing, even when in use, as you were saying, they are feeding back very actively. So the feedback loop is becoming stronger and stronger. And so in search, in store, and in use, the digital continuum is very much a reality. And lastly, I think the important thing that has changed before and after is this melting away of boundaries between sales and marketing. You see, otherwise you were doing everything till there was a test form fill, and then coming to the store, and then, thank you, I've convinced you, and now it's over to sales. But when a person is, in a sense, doing that via digital channels, where does that boundary line sit? So, we have to be much more assertively collaborative. We have to be more imaginative about the possibilities. And it also gives us much more joy in terms of customer lifetime value. So it is a change that is here to stay.
I think it's a terrific analogy. I remember when I started working in the auto business in 1998, 99, we had a ratio of 1:3 conversions on test drive. So marketing's job was to get the customer into the showroom, and 1 out of every 3 customer, will buy. That was the rule of thumb. I don't think that exists. And what you said is right. Even after the test drive, the guy is going to keep searching. He's going to keep asking. And if you don't track that customer after he takes a test drive, you lost that guy, to someone else. So let me go to Kavita. Do you want to talk about, I know IKEA is a much loved brand, but probably you're also being attacked for various things. How are you managing that?
Very good question, Nambi, again. But I think
quality of your biryani has come under question in Hyderabad, I'm told.
Oh, really? That is not something I'm aware of, but I thought we're getting very good reviews on our biryani in Hyderabad. People are loving it. But I think the core question, I think digital has become a very powerful tool. And what is happening is it is really changing the context of brand building. And particularly in India, we can see that digital adoption was always very high. But in the post-pandemic world, it has only accelerated. We're talking about maybe 900 million people on their mobile phone. And as Subhranshu pointed out, 80% of customer journeys start online. right? Anything you want to buy today, people first go to a search engine and type some keywords, and that is the starting point of the customer journey. So I think today's consumer lives on the smartphone, right? And they are not just driven by the communication that is coming out from an organization. They are more driven by recommendations, ratings, and reviews, what everybody else is saying. And at times they want to make their own decisions, willing to make mistakes and also correct them, right? So make your own mistakes and learn from them also seems to be the mantra of the newer generation in that sense. And I think what is important for us as organizations maybe is the ability to create communities around a topic. Like, for example, in our context at IKEA, we try to create a community around home furnishing. And every time we ask consumers to share content related to what their home looks like, what is the newest change that they've made in their home, we get a plethora of responses. There is so much interest around a topic like that. It on its own sustains itself because everybody has this need to share on social media platforms today, right? And that is a
okay.
very
Let me ask. Suppose you were to ask people to share something about their home furnishing, etc., and you say that I'll give you a whatever 1,000 rupee gift check or whatever. How many entries do you get? Is it in hundreds? Is it in thousands? Is it in tens?
It is in thousands today. It is definitely not millions yet, but we think it will be in millions, right? Because we can clearly see that often we don't even need to give people a voucher or a carrot of some kind to even do that, right? People actually feel a passion to share. People want to open up their homes. Also because we are living in the world of Zoom calls, we can see each other's homes. I can exactly call out the color of the curtain in Subhranshu's home, for example. Right. So that is also a change that is happening. But in general, I see tremendous amount of interest when we start to look at any kind of user-generated content today. And then to your point, when there is some sad flow, right? When the process does not work well, today more than ever, consumers are very ready to put it out there, be it Twitter, be it LinkedIn, be it Facebook, wherever they want to. Apart from, of course, reaching out to your customer support center. And there, the big question for us is how do we convert that interaction to a positive one, right? Of course, it is an irate customer who's not had a great experience. At IKEA, even with 2 markets, we have millions of transactions that happen, right? And there are a few transactions that go wrong. But the question in front of us is, it is a call to a customer support center, but can we convert it into a positive experience, right? What can we do there? And then it is not just customer support or marketing. There are multiple functions that are involved to make that process better, right? Okay. And finally, I think because of how the consumers are behaving, there is a lot of data out there, right? And the question in front of organizations is, are we leveraging the data to make more data-driven decisions that are more relevant and more personalized to what the consumers would like to see, right? So for me, those are the 3 most important elements when it comes to a more digitally savvy, a much more digitally engaged consumer in India today.
Great. So thank you. I think Subhranshu wanted to.
No, I was just wanting to add a quick data point because you queried around how many people would respond. We did a competition a few months ago called The Art of Motorcycling, where we were asking people to send in art, illustrations on what their view of Royal Enfield or our motorcycles or exploration is. We got 10,000. The amazing part is 60% of them were from really small towns in India, less than 5 lakh pop strata, and almost 50% of them did not own our motorcycles. So what that tells you is it's two-way traffic, is that lots of stimulus is also reaching people. And they are therefore, particularly in high involvement categories, living with that thinking and that process for several years before they make the decision. So, so the driver who went with you to IKEA store knew about it and had been passing it, or in his worldview, that was an important thing to do. And then he got the opportunity when you went there. So I'm saying that's also happening very actively and very digitally nowadays.
Absolutely. I think, going back about 15 years ago, when we used to do these user-generated contests, my earlier avatar done it for Tata Motors, done it for Amul. Response was very, very low, especially when you ask them for send in films, it was very low. But today, if I were to run Amul had done this on recipes, and I think they have a fabulous collection of recipes on their website. Yeah, Vivek.
No, you triggered a thought in my head. So just to give an example, I think digital offers an opportunity to engage with audiences who are beyond your core target audience. So for example, Fevicol for a brand, which is not seen by consumer when it's bought and used, and after it's used, it's hidden in the furniture. And young audiences are not my target audience, but they are engaging with us digitally because the Fevicol is having a dialogue with them. So we also did an activity last year around advertising. You know that without asking, people create ads around Fevicol and send scripts to us, they send films to us, and a lot of memes are made around the brand. We don't ask for it. So we asked people to make their own Fevicol ads and send it to us. We got 6,000 plus entries. Now that takes a lot of effort for people to create advertising and send it to you. So I think digital has opened avenues for Fevicol to engage with younger audience and expose them to Fevicol philosophy of unbreakable bond much before they get into the furniture making. And I think I want to add to what Shubhranshu said is very important because we also have a brand called Dr. Fixit for waterproofing. So I think social media listening is very important for brand as a caution when we market and we engage with audience in this medium because the communication is two-way and you have to create structures in your agencies, have the right tools, and make sure that your response to consumers is not only through AI and bots, which is standard response. You often have to give customized response and ensure response in the field. So I think that is, and so digital offers us an opportunity as well as a caution for us to use it very well. And I would again underline what Shubhranshu said about listening and responding is so important in this new medium.
With that, thank you very much for joining us and sharing your terrific insight. We covered a whole range from Fevicol, which I know there's a Fevistick lying there, which is 5 rupees, and to Mercedes-Benz. There's a Mercedes-Benz parked downstairs, which cost me a hell of a lot of money. I will not tell you how much. And so it's a great range of products we've had. So thank you very much for joining.
Thank you everyone for delving into this discussion. Truly very engaging and insightful. Stay tuned for the next session.